April 10th through 12th. Open for kids 12 and under. Tickets at thewoodlandsartscouncil.org, where dreams take shape.
Wreck of the Jersey Village area, inbound 290. Before you get to the belt, looking at it live on camera, a couple of right lanes blocked off there. Sunny, mid-80s for the high, upper 60s for the low tonight. Slight chance of rain for Tuesday, going up 30 to 40% chance Wednesday, going into Thursday. 60% chance you're going to get wet on Saturday. Right now, 69 Sugarland, 70 here at the University of Houston. Streaming live online at houstonpublicmedia.org, on our app as well. News updated 24/7. It's KUHF Houston News 88.7. A service of the University of Houston. Houston Matters starts right now. Stick around, 9 o'clock.
The partial government shutdown enters its 45th day and continues to affect TSA operations across the country. I'm Joshua Zinn in for Craig Cohen, and today on Houston Matters, we get the latest on security wait times at Bush Airport.
Houston Matters with Craig Cohen is a production of Houston Public Media with support from Baylor College of Medicine.
Also this hour, a number of No Kings protests took place in the region over the weekend. We learn more from Houston Public Media's Melissa Enaje. Then, new research explores how generative AI affects creativity. So we talk with a panel of creative experts about their thoughts on the matter. And we'll discuss the Astros' middling opening series against the Los Angeles Angels and the prospects for the season to come. Thanks for joining us on News 88.7. Remember to check out our live video feed on Houston Public Media's YouTube channel. We'll start with a news update from NPR and News 88.7. Stay with us.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President Trump says Iran must soon reach a deal with the U.S. and immediately reopen the Strait of Hormuz to oil tankers. He wrote online this morning, if Iran fails, the U.S. will blow up all of Iran's electricity plants and oil wells. He also threatened desalination plants. Tens of millions of Iranian civilians need these plants or they cannot get water. Trump also says his administration is talking to a new Iranian regime he described as reasonable. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says there's been a change.
There are clearly people there talking to us in ways that previous people in charge in Iran have not spoken to us in the past. Some of the things they're willing to do, some of the things they're saying they're willing to do. Obviously, they have to go do it. We're going to test that proposition very strongly because we always prefer to settle things through negotiation and diplomacy.
However, the Trump administration continues to send more U.S. troops to the Mideast to join others who are already there. About 50,000 U.S. troops are now in the region. Iran's capital experienced mass power outages over the weekend after airstrikes damaged power facilities. Now, Russia's State Nuclear Energy Corporation warns ongoing U.S. and Israeli strikes are endangering a nuclear power plant in southern Iran. NPR's Emily Fang reports.
Iranian state media says shrapnel from weekend strikes damaged power equipment in Tehran and nearby Karaj city, leading to hours-long blackouts in both places. Israel said over the weekend it had hit some 140 targets in Iran. Iran said several of those strikes hit universities and is now threatening to hit U.S. campuses in the Middle East in retaliation. Meanwhile, Russia's State Nuclear Energy Corporation Rosatom is warning that strikes are deteriorating the condition of Iran's Bushehr nuclear plant. Rosatom helped build the Bushehr plant, which has been hit multiple times during the war. No damage has been reported from those strikes, but more than 160 Rosatom staff members have returned to Russia, according to the company, with more evacuations planned from the plant in the coming days. Emily Fang, NPR News, Van, Turkey.
Stocks opened mixed this morning as crude oil prices continue to climb. NPR's Scott Horsley reports the Dow's up about 200 points.
Crude oil prices in the U.S. jumped back above $100 a barrel. Retail gasoline prices are hovering just below $4 a gallon. Traders are trying to sort through mixed signals about the U.S. and Israel's war with Iran. That country has retaliated with attacks on energy infrastructure in both Israel and Kuwait. Yemen's Houthi rebels also fired missiles at Israel, raising concern the Iranian-backed group might resume its attacks on commercial shipping traffic in the Red Sea. That would add another complication for global commerce, already squeezed by Iran's chokehold on the Strait of Hormuz. Asian stocks were mixed overnight, down in Tokyo, Seoul, and Hong Kong, but slightly higher in Shanghai. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
You're listening to NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from the Lemelson Foundation, dedicated to improving lives through invention, innovation, and climate action. and the William T. Grant Foundation, supporting research to improve the lives of young people at WTGrantFDN.org.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Matt Harab. Gas prices continue to rise locally, however, not nearly at the pace of previous weeks. The average price for a gallon of regular fuel right now in Houston is $3.62. That's about 5 cents higher, that's it, than the previous week. The price of oil continues to rise as the war in the Middle East rages on. West Texas crude is trading at above $100 a barrel this morning. The No Kings protest in the Houston region drew thousands of demonstrators Saturday as part of the nationwide movement in response to President Donald Trump and his policies. Debbie Nance and a group of her older adult friends have attended all 3 No Kings protests at different locations throughout Harris and Brazoria counties, noticing an uptick in people who attend.
They're switching positions and they're thinking about who we've elected as leaders, and they're reconsidering that.
Stay here. We're going to have more on the protest just ahead on Houston Matters. And a proposed desalination plant near Galveston Bay was the topic of discussion at a town hall hosted by a community group in Galveston County last week. News 88.7's Juliana Washburn was there.
Canadian-based utility company Epcor Utilities is seeking a permit to build a desalination plant to help with water security in the region. The plant would remove salt and minerals from seawater to produce over 24 million gallons of drinking water a day. Some nearby residents, like Gina Smith, are worried about the impact the plant's discharge would have on marine life.
There is a water issue that's happening. We need to address that issue. We need to do it in the safest way possible. You can't just throw away your community because you need water. You've got to make a choice about what works and what doesn't work, and we need to think hard about it.
Epcor representatives were also at the meeting to answer questions and address concerns. Representatives have repeatedly said the plant would have a minimal impact on the environment. From the Galveston County Bureau, I'm Juliana Washburn, News 88.7.
70 degrees right now here on the UH campus, high of 84 this afternoon. I'm Matt Harab, News 88.7.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Joshua Zinn, filling in today for Craig Cohen. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on News 88.7 and Houston Public Media's YouTube channel. Coming up this hour, we explore the intersection of AI and creativity. We revisit the precursor to the famous Apollo missions, and we discuss the Astros' 2-2 start to the season and what to expect going forward. But first, the gridlock on Capitol Hill and in the nation's airports served as the backdrop for nationwide demonstrations over the weekend, protesting President Trump's agenda. More than a dozen No Kings protests were scheduled for the greater Houston area on Saturday, marking the latest round of coordinated nationwide demonstrations organized by a coalition that includes 5051 Movement, a grassroots organization that quickly spread online last year. The group's name stands for 50 Protests, 50 States, One Movement, and it was first proposed in late January 2025 on the social media site Reddit. Houston Public Media's Melissa Enaje covers Fort Bend County and was at protests in Fort Bend and Brazoria counties and joins us this morning to discuss. Good morning, Melissa.
Good morning.
Houston, you were in Sugar Land on Saturday. What was the atmosphere like and how large was the crowd there?
Yeah, so I was at 2 protests, and one of the protests in Sugar Land, it was very lively, engaged. There was hundreds of people who lined up close to the Smart Financial Center in Sugar Land on University Boulevard. And the crowds were large, especially in Pearland, in Brazoria County. They were also just very much engaged, lively, and I would say kind and polite as well.
What kinds of people did you see there? Was it mostly activists? Were there folks who typically wouldn't come out to protests?
Yeah, so since this was the 3rd installment of the No Kings protests, for some of these individuals, this is their 3rd rally. For some of them, this is their 2nd. And for a lot of families, yes, there were young families and there were elderly, there were or senior citizens, and there were retired military veterans. But there were also these young families who were there for the first time and just want to have their voices heard.
So speaking of that, I mean, what were some of the concerns that you heard? Were there specific parts of Trump's agenda, of what's going on, that had people fired up?
Yeah, I would say the energy was very, very palpable in terms of outspoken groups about the war in Iran, about affordability, about the cost of living and how it's affecting their everyday lives, to the separation of families in detention centers. They're just very much ramped up about this. They want to go out and feel like they're a part of something that's bigger than them and having their voices heard.
Fort Bend County in particular is one of the most diverse counties in the country, has been trending purple in recent years. Did the crowd reflect that diversity, and did you get a sense that this movement is kind of going beyond just the typical base of people who would normally participate?
Yeah, again, for some of these families that were there for the first time, they were there with their family, and they felt like this was something they had to do. We had the senior citizens or the elderly who were there with groups, and they felt like they wanted to mobilize younger people. They felt like there wasn't enough younger people, but very diverse and age ranges and families and young teens to a very diverse crowd.
So you said you went to a couple of protests. You went to one in Fort Bend, one in Brazoria County. Were there any significant differences between the two protests? Were they very similar? I mean, how would you compare and contrast them?
Yeah, I saw a lot more, law enforcement in the Sugar Land protest. They were very visible. They were there just kind of monitoring, and there was nothing that happened when I was there or occurred that required their necessary interventions. But the Pearland one was interesting because it was kind of like this HQ. They were pumping each other up before they were dispersing, and they were kind of uniting and reminding each other what they're gathering for, why they're gathering, and it felt like they were just kind of chanting again and remembering what they did for some of them for the second or third time. So very much different in the organization, but the same momentum.
Mm-hmm. The coalition organized more than a dozen protests in the Houston area. How coordinated did it feel on the ground? Was it pretty clear organization? Was it a little more organic?
I think it was very clear with the organization, this being their third installment. Some of the familiar faces who were helping those who haven't attended a protest before, but I felt like they picked very crowded intersections that were very intentional. Like for the Pearland rally, after they spoke to each other and said, pick up all the trash, make sure we leave the place a better place and not leave it a mess. So they felt like they were kind to the environment as well. And then they dispersed to 3 different locations with high traffic in Pearland. And for Sugar Land, they were there at, again, by Smart Financial Center, a lot of car traffic. And it just felt like they just knew the routine. Talking to the people and having their chance. You had mentioned law enforcement presence. Were there any kinds of counter protesters, anything in opposition to the No Kings folks? Right. I didn't notice any visible that were there in large crowds against these No Kings protests. I will say one of the families that I spoke to, the younger families, they had their kids who were kind of preteens holding signs, and a family spending probably, time together, but, demonstrating instead of being at the movies or something. But she told me that her son experienced, a couple people giving him the thumbs down and booing. And she said that was important for them to also experience that because it was important for them to have their voices heard and to feel that, opposition is a part of life. This is just a regular thing. So organizers have suggested that these demonstrations will continue. Did some of the folks you spoke to, especially the people that came for the first time, did they see this as a sort of one-time outlet for themselves, or do you think a lot of them are planning to stay engaged and might participate in future protests? Oh, absolutely. Especially in the Sugar Land protests, there were, booths for voter registration. They're looking towards the November elections, the midterms. They're very focused and hyper-focused, I would say, on engaging those who probably haven't voted, engaging those who aren't unaware. One of the officials at the Pearland rally, she said that she's going door to door and she's speaking with her neighbors. She's asking everyone to, let's continue this momentum. Let's talk to those who may not be engaged, who may not be registered to vote. It's going to take more than just a protest. It's going to take more than just voting, volunteer, talk to others. So it's definitely one piece of the puzzle. Melissa Enaje covers Fort Bend County for Houston Public Media. Melissa, thank you so much. Thank you so much. The partial government shutdown affecting the Department of Homeland Security is now in its 45th day, making it the longest in U.S. history. The shutdown impacts funding for DHS agencies, including the Transportation Security Agency, or TSA, and Border Patrol. And George Bush Intercontinental Airport has been among the most affected airports in the country, with wait times at some points over the past few weeks exceeding 5 hours. Over the weekend, lines shrunk dramatically, with some waits as short as 15 minutes. It remains unclear why
wait time shortened, but on Friday, President Donald Trump did sign an executive order to pay TSA agents. According to border czar Tom Homan, those payments could go out as soon as today or possibly tomorrow. Houston Public Media's Bianca Seward has been reporting from Bush Airport all week and joins us on the line for the very latest. Good morning, Bianca.
Good morning. How are you guys?
We're good. Hopefully nice and quiet over there. Last week you saw what seemed to be never-ending long lines. What's it been like this morning?
It is a ghost town compared to what we saw last week. I mean, they still have the setup where with the winding ropes in case the line does bump back up, but there is next to no one here compared to what we saw last week. It is a remarkable difference.
DHS deployed ICE officers to assist TSA, though, as you reported, those officers seem to primarily be patrolling the airport and helping it with lines, handing out water to folks who are spending hours in line. As far as you can tell, are there more TSA agents on shift today, or are you still seeing ICE agents present?
I am still seeing a couple of ICE agents. We know that last week DHS had gotten some ICE agents through some basic TSA training. So they were then upgraded to helping check IDs, helping manage logistics, helping with some crowd control. Still not back in the TSA security-related measures. That still remains under TSA purview. But they had a boost in responsibility here at the airport. So they are still here. And Tom Homan said on CNN over the weekend that ICE agents would remain in airports that didn't feel they were 100% quite yet. We know that TSA agents are expected to get checks as early as today, but until that happens, until the workforce is fully back, Homan says that ICE agents will still be present.
You mentioned it's kind of a ghost town over there. Have you had a chance to talk to any travelers this morning?
I have. I had a chance to talk to a couple of different families, and they didn't seem to quite believe their luck. After a week of headlines, they said they were still padding extra time, giving themselves at least 3 hours at the airport, though very pleasantly surprised to see that the wait times were next to nothing.
Have airport officials given any indication as to whether they plan to have more terminals reopen with TSA screening as more agents potentially return to work?
That seems like the plan. When I spoke with airport officials last week, they were trying to staff as many lanes as they could. They have 37 possible lanes of security here. They were only able to do up to 50% last week. So the hope is that they'll be able to open more up. But until that workforce comes back, they're not going to get ahead of themselves.
Well, hopefully it stays quiet for you. Bianca Seward is a reporter for Houston Public Media. Stay tuned to 88.7 throughout the day for updates with Bianca in our hourly newscasts and on Hello Houston later today. Bianca, thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
Up next, how does generative AI use affect creativity? We discuss as Houston Matters continues on News 88.7 and YouTube.
You count on Houston Public Media. That's why you're here right now. Take the next step and become a new member today. Every gift makes a difference. And with a gift of $5 a month or more, you'll receive PBS Passport, a member benefit that lets you stream more of the shows you love anytime. It only takes a minute to make a big difference. Join as a new member today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 800-364-8300.
And from Baylor College of Medicine. Baylor's work centers on advancing health and medicine through research, education, and patient care.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Metro, introducing the Ride Metro Fare Card. The Ride Metro Fare system replaces the Metro Q Fare Card for bus and rail fares. Details at ridemetro.org/fare system.
Mid-80s for the high, sunshine today, 70 right now here at News 88.7.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Joshua Zinn, in today for Craig Cohen. As the field of artificial intelligence grows and the capabilities of the technology advance further, a sticking point for some might continue to be the use of generative AI, particularly when it comes to creative fields. For some, Gen AI is a useful tool for developing or expanding on new ideas. Others might challenge whether a piece of visual art, music, or literature created by an AI system has the same value or relative quality compared to things created by human artists. Is someone who creates an AI-generated thing an artist? Some researchers are aiming to explore the intersections of AI and creativity, like Jingwei Ho, assistant professor at the University of Houston's Bauer College of Business. Her research considers whether generative AI helps or hinders the creative process, and her experiments focused on the area of graphic design. The study considered AI usage between two groups, a set of amateurs and a set of experts, both trying to use generative AI to produce graphic design work. Here is her explanation of the approach and the results.
In this research work, which we published, we kind of look at the creativity
we may be having some
process
technical issues
in the sense
with,
that we don't just say, just look at whether people have or do not have AI. Does that influence their final outcome? In the sense that we don't just look at that, but we want to open the black box. Whether people have the AI influence the whole process? Does that influence their final outcome? We don't just look at that, but we want to open the black box. How does the AI influence the whole process of doing creative work? And what we find is at the we in general divide the creative process into two stages. In the first stage, this is how people do creative work. In the first stage, there's brainstorming. This is the initial idea, what I'm going to create. They may have 10 or 20 ideas at the beginning, right? That's the brainstorming stage. And then they enter, after brainstorming, they pick one or two ideas that's most possible. They think of the highest quality or, the most meaningful, and then materialize that in the second stage, which we call the implementation stage. In the second stage, people work on realizing or the production of the final artwork or design, because of its computational power. AI, right? If you give AI a prompt, anything, give me 10 ideas, generate 20 ideas in computational power. Seconds, right? It can do that, AI which is far more powerful than any human being. Generate 20 ideas. Any human being, meaning ordinary people or experts. It can do that. So it's very, very helpful, super helpful in the first stage. However, when we look at the second stage, in the implementation part, AI is still very helpful to ordinary people like like me, who have no training or no idea how to materialize our artwork. It's still very, very helpful. But for the experts, this is where the interesting part becomes because we find that while using AI in the second stage do not hurt the quality of the production, it does take longer time. In a sense, it decreases the productivity, the efficiency of producing the work. This is because we find, then we try to find out why this happens, right? So we find out that expertise, because of their years of training, education, and practice, they have very established methods or approaches to do their work. For artists, in our example, they may do initial hand scratching, then they do some shading, then coloring, then refining some of the line work, they may final presentation. They have this process. This is in their like a muscle memory they have. It's so established that when they work with AI uses a totally different approach. This is in their like a deep neural network models. It's so established latent space. When they work with totally different. So when they collaborate on the final implementation models, experts find it very it's totally different. Very, so when they collaborate, much more effort to revise the AI work. So that took a longer time. We find we have video data to show that experts actually revised what AI did. It took them longer time to redo the work, abandon some of the AI work and do their own work, etc. So that's what AI the key issue here. It took them longer time to redo the work, abandon some of the AI work and do their own work, etc. So that's the key issue here. Is what we find.
UH Assistant Professor Jingwei Ho discussing her research into AI and creativity. Joining us now to discuss the intersection of creativity and generative AI a little more deeply are three local creative minds, all from a variety of disciplines. Laura Spector is a visual artist, Anthony Brandt is a composer, and Lupe Mendez is a writer and poet. Welcome all of you to Houston Matters.
Thank you for having us.
And we welcome your thoughts on this at 713-440-8870, talk@houstonmatters.org, or you can comment on the live stream on our YouTube channel. So we just heard from the researcher about how generative AI was helpful during the brainstorming process for the 2 test groups, but it actually slowed down productivity for the group of graphic design experts, people with experience who know how to handle graphic design in the second phase where they're actually implementing the work. I'm curious what each of you make of those findings. Laura.
I think that that's probably fairly accurate. I definitely have used it for brainstorming larger ideas. But then yesterday I spent about 8 hours in my studio sculpting with my hands, and I can't see how AI would be able to help me with that. However, if I'm using different chemicals or different mixtures for casting, I do utilize AI to help me with expediting the, what I need to know. What are my measurements? How am I utilizing my materials? So I do integrate it into my practice, and then it becomes very helpful afterwards if I need to write for grants or send in essays or whatnot.
Yeah. Anthony, Brandt, what do you think?
So I want to call attention to one feature of the study, which is that the time scale was really short.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea generation took 10 minutes. That's a typical feature in creativity research. Often they're just giving humans a little amount of time. And I feel like that's playing on AI's playing field. If you want it to be fast, AI is always going to beat us. But time may be the unsung hero of human creativity. Mm-hmm. What we're able to do when we mull over something and meditate on it and think about it over time, I think far surpasses what AI is able to come up with. And so that concerns me. And the other thing that concerns me is that this tool is so powerful. This push a button and it generates the work for you. Should we be giving it to novices? Or are we going to keep them from developing the skills themselves? I was thinking about, are the kids of the future going to learn self-driving cars and they don't learn to drive, And then you'll never learn to drive. And if you ever had to drive, you couldn't. Are we risking doing the same thing with generative AI?
Yeah. Lupe, what do you think?
I keyed in on the implementation part, the idea that it's the frustrating level. I key back to the idea of our aesthetics, like the things that I'm creating with what I'm creating. I know what they are, exactly the point that Professor Ho made about the expertise of the individual. We know exactly what our passions and drives are, and so trying to have something generative create it for us and then having to clip it and figure it out is too much. It's too cumbersome. And so it's better left to the artist that's creating from the beginning to the end.
Yeah. Anthony, I know that one of your areas of research is focused on the brain itself and how it works during the creative process. I'm curious how the questions around AI use kind of fit into that. And is that something you're thinking about as this technology grows and grows?
Oh, great question. So large language models largely use randomness to generate their creative output. So if they didn't, then you'd always get the most likely possible token as the answer to, the solution to the creative problem. But there's something called the temperature, which is the amount of randomness. The higher the temperature, the greater the amount of randomness. And there's something called top case sampling, which is how many options does the computer allow itself to choose from. I think randomness can be part of the human creative process. I think about theater improv where somebody from the audience calls out sofa and they do a skit on that. But I also think insight is incredibly important in the human creative process, that our sense of bringing things together where we see an overlap, which maybe other people haven't seen, is incredibly important. And those systems can't do that, at least not yet. Mm-hmm. So I think part of the thing that's so fascinating about AI creativity is what it reveals about all the unsung parts of human creativity that maybe we haven't fully acknowledged.
Yeah. Lupe, I know that you're an educator. You work with young writers and work with people kind of working on that. And Anthony had sort of referenced this, if younger people are engaging with this new technology, are they skipping some steps? And so when you think about this, does it make your work any easier, any harder, about the same? How does it work as an educator?
It makes it more difficult because it's like we're flying the plane while building it almost. Like you've introduced the concept of generative AI into spaces, and now the conversation is, let's train the youth on AI. Like slow it down. Like we need to teach. We go back in writing, we talk about learning the rules so you can break them, especially in art. Like, we need to be able to train kids on what are the practical things that they have to understand about composition, about writing, about all the structure and forms of all these things. And then if they want to be able to use what AI can do, it has to be on the basis that the majority of the work that you've created is the basis. And then you can use what these things are to enhance what you've already created. I think it's a lot of shortcutting just to provide this thing and then just say, make it make something for me when it's not doing anyone any service. It's also pulling from inaccurate sources as well, because a lot of disinformation is still out in the public sphere. And you could be turning in write me a paper and cite sources, and then all the sources are like non-existent things that they just pull from some random spot.
Yeah. Laura, I think AI-generated art is particularly controversial for some, and you can find it all over the internet and social media. People can just throw in a prompt and create something that either looks like an artwork, or maybe they can create, something to advertise something. How do you engage or not engage with that as an artist?
I don't really engage with finished artworks that are wholly produced by AI. I feel like there's a lived experience that's ignored when someone completely finishes a work of art and through AI and says, here it is. What I'm most excited about is the potential for AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, which we're all on a race to get to internationally. Millions, billions of dollars are being thrown at it. I'm excited about that because I think in the art world, what we'll see is exponential growth. I think we'll see the end of postmodernism. I think it will be evolutionary, because what we've come to with postmodernism in art is a system that can be cracked, and it's numbers at this point. And I feel like that's going to end that ism in art and move us into the next thing, which I think will rely very heavily on human experiences and our lived experiences, our emotions, and getting back to empathy.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Joshua Zinn, filling in for Craig Cohen. We're talking with artist Laura Spector, composer Anthony Brandt, and poet Lupe Mendez about AI and creativity. We welcome your questions and comments at talk@houstonmatters.org, 713-440-8870, or you can comment on Houston Public Media's YouTube stream. I think for some people, the question of quality is at the center of a lot of skepticism over AI. When some might see an AI-generated thing, whether it be a piece of art, a piece of music, a piece of writing, and immediately think that it's of lesser quality because it wasn't created by a human artist. Is that judgment fair? Lupe, I'll start with you.
I would say yes, in a way, in terms of, oh, man. If we're looking at what the commercial value of a thing is, then it's the difference between entertainment and actual art, right? Like building something that I've created with my understanding, my ethics, my aesthetics of a thing when producing a crafted work. It takes time and energy and in cases of the work that I'm doing currently, it's a lot of interviews. That's not something that can just be whipped up within like a 10-minute portion of like getting to the generative thing. It's a difficult landscape when looking at what can be produced. It's the difference between quality over quantity almost. So, yeah.
Anthony Brandt, what do you think about the quality question?
Yeah, so it's important to remember that these large language models are norm-based systems. They're aiming for high probability outcomes more than anything. They want to be right and to be useful. And one of the human superpowers is we can go to edge cases. We can go to the rare and the unusual and the unexpected much more comfortably and easily because we're just able to take risks. Another thing, Dr. Ho's study is very elegant, but she talks about the value of AI in getting past what she calls cognitive fixation in humans, where you kind of hold on to your original idea a little bit too tightly. But I think it's also worth mentioning that AI has cognitive fixation. So, for instance, there was a study where they trained the AI to judge the creativity of drawings. And then they looked at, well, what did the AI use? And it was the amount of ink. So the more ink you used, the more it judged it as creative. Well, you can see the problem with that. And so there's other studies that show that, well, AI results when you look at them overall, tend to be much more homogeneous than humans, which speaks to what Laura is saying about our individual experiences and our diversity in the way we approach the world. So there's a lot of reasons why I think we need to exercise a lot of caution around AI, and I think the quality issue is a very big one.
Yeah. Laura, what do you think?
I think that AI picks from the most average. I think it always rebounds back to the average thought, the average creativity. And I would reiterate what Anthony's just saying about it's not finding the risk, it's not finding the extreme, and it's definitely not finding the lived experience. And so I don't think that a finished work is going to be much quality. I do think that it's a remarkable technology, though.
We had an interesting comment on our YouTube stream from GT7 who says, photography changed painting, the camera obscura changed drawing, Pro Tools changed music, here we go again. So is AI just another new technology that we're all going to have to coexist with? How does it fit into sort of the lineage of a new thing comes out and changes the art form, but does the art form stay the same? Anthony, I'll start with you on that.
Yeah, I think it's the difference between being a tool and replacing us. I think as a tool, it's incredibly powerful, and you can imagine amazing frontiers that lie ahead of us. But the way it's sold to the public too often is something that's capable of replacing us, and that, I think, is significantly different. The piano didn't replace the composer. The camera didn't replace the person taking the picture. There, I think we're in a difficult place.
Yeah. Laura?
I think that it's another tool. I think it's a really powerful tool, and I think it will start maybe separating practitioners from hobbyists, but it will also give people who have never thought that they could ever do anything creative, let's keep it in the creative realm, it will give them opportunities. I've been using Suno, and I'm making songs. Does it make me a composer? No. But it does give me a taste or a sense of what that is, and I would imagine that's so powerful for young minds. So that's...
Yeah. Lupe, I'm curious about what you think, especially because I feel like writing has always kind of been writing. Has there been a technology that's really changed writing other than maybe the computer or the typewriter?
I mean, what I keep hearing from colleagues that are on the university level and then other colleagues across secondary study, it's become more of a thing to check for, because we, again, have not taught youth how to use this as the tool that it is. At the end of the day, it's everything that we've all said. It's the tool first. It has to be the tool first. If it were to generate whatever it was generating, it's going to gas out, because if it's not informed by human experience and by human use, it's not going to go anywhere. And so I think to train everyone, both instructor and student, in that regard, needs to be the basic tool of whatever we continue to use this going forward with.
No. Lupe Mendez is a poet and writer. Anthony Brandt is a composer and professor at Rice University. And Laura Spector is a visual artist based here in Houston. Thank you all for talking with me.
Thank
you, Joshua.
Thank you.
Still to come, the history of the Gemini space program as Houston Matters continues on News 88.7 and YouTube.
Hello, I'm Frank Billingsley.
It's not just your car. It's the one that brought your kids home from school, took you cross-country, held memories, laughter, even a few breakdowns. When it's time to let go, give your car a new purpose. Donate it and turn memories into meaningful support for this station. Plus, you'll enjoy free and easy pickup, potential tax benefits, and a simple donation process. Your gift supports the programs you and your family love. Donate today and help keep public media strong. Call or donate online.
Deposits in this economy has been going up, but not all banks have been on the receiving end.
Community banks, particularly in smaller communities that aren't growing as rapidly, just have fewer deposits to attract.
I'm Kai Rizdal. Size matters. Next time on Marketplace.
Marketplace is tonight at 6:30 right here on News 88.7.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Joshua Zinn. As of right now, Artemis II, the mission to send 4 astronauts around the moon, is set to launch this coming Wednesday, with a few optional dates in case of delays. This would mark the first time humans have returned to the moon since the Apollo program in the 1970s. While most of the attention surrounding Houston's role in getting Americans to the moon back in the 1960s and 70s tends to center on the Apollo program, the one that preceded it may, in some eyes, tend to get short shrift. I'm talking about Gemini, or Gemini, depending on who you talk to. Last November, Craig Cohen spoke with Jeffrey Kluger, an editor-at-large for Time magazine and the author of Gemini, Stepping Stone to the Moon, The Untold Story, which chronicles the program in question. Craig began their conversation with that very question about the program's pronunciation.
Well, that's, as you say, it depends on who you talk to. When the program was just established in 1962, there wasn't a big astrology community in the U.S., so the word Gemini was new to a lot of people, and they did not know how to pronounce it. NASA, within the walls of NASA, the long E pronunciation became adopted, Gemini as opposed to Gemini. And that actually came up in the media a lot. Reporters were always asking how to pronounce it. So NASA decided to actually issue a press release and stated that their Names and Nomenclature Committee, which, by the way, did not exist, had approved the pronunciation Gemini. So within the walls of NASA, it was Gemini. Everywhere else, it was Gemini. Reporters like Walter Cronkite adopted the NASA pronunciation because that was sort of the shibboleth that showed you belonged. So I use the pronunciation Gemini when I'm talking about astrology, and Gemini when I'm talking about the space program.
Okay, that works for me, and the Walter Cronkite part sealed it for me, too. 16 astronauts flew on 10 Gemini missions. What were some of the things that they accomplished?
Well, they accomplished basically all of the hard maneuverability and navigational skills that were needed to survive in Apollo. When Mercury flew, the astronauts were more or less passengers riding aboard a spacecraft over which they had little control. Gemini was a very nimble craft that was highly maneuverable, and that allowed for a lot of exercises and skills to be practiced. It was in Gemini that we learned how to rendezvous and dock with another spacecraft, which is a skill that would be essential when we were going to the moon, since the lunar module had to dock and undock with the mothership, the orbiter that brought them home. We learned long duration missions during Mercury. The longest mission was 22 orbits or 33 hours, but a trip to the moon could take 2 weeks. So we practiced long duration missions. And critically and most dramatically, we practiced spacewalking, which would be a skill that would be needed. When we landed on the moon, astronauts had to know how to ingress and egress their vehicles. So all of these skills that made astronauts pilots more than passengers were perfected during Gemini.
While they were testing out long duration in space, the truth is these 10 missions took place in a very short period of time, just 20 months. Was that fast pace maybe one of the reasons that it tends to be less appreciated today than the Apollo program?
Well, that's a real possibility. The Apollo program ran for 4 years from 1968 to 1972, and in some respects went on even longer than that, because in 1975, we had the joint Apollo-Soyuz mission with the Soviet Union, and in 1973 and 74, Apollo spacecraft were used to get to and from Skylab. So in some respects, the Apollo program lasted 7 years. Gemini, as you say, was just 20 months. And I think that sort of eye blink lifespan may indeed have been a part of the reason that Gemini didn't get as much attention as Mercury and Apollo. The other reason was the drama factor. In Mercury, we were launching astronauts into space for the first time. It's where we got Al Shepard and John Glenn. It's when we were in our closest foot race with the Soviets. And Apollo, of course, went to the moon, so there was natural public appeal there. Gemini was, it was more of a technical and engineering program than the other two were.
What was Houston's role in these missions?
Houston was, as I say in the book, NASA was a lot of things. It was, an institution. It was an agency. It was, closely tied to the military. But it was also one of the biggest, juiciest pieces of congressional pork that Washington had ever cooked up. And there were a lot of cities competing for the to be home to the Space Center, and Houston was selected in large part because Lyndon Johnson was vice president at the point at that point, and Johnson, of course, was a Texan. So 1,620 acres of land near Clear Lake were made available, and Mission Control got built in Houston.
I think a lot of folks are aware of the deadly fire on the launch pad that took the lives of 3 astronauts at the start of the Apollo missions. Were there any close calls during the Gemini missions?
There were a couple of deaths. Charlie Bassett and Elliot See, who were supposed to fly Gemini 9, died in a plane crash at the McDonnell Aviation Factory, which is where the Mercury and Gemini spacecraft were built. But there were a couple of near-death experiences on Gemini 8 in 1966. Neil Armstrong and Dave Scott were in orbit around the Earth, having docked with an Agena target vehicle. When their spacecraft began to spin out of control, it got up to about 60 revolutions per minute, or 1 revolution every second, which tipped the astronauts into near vertigo, something that they would not have recovered from if Neil Armstrong hadn't been pilot enough to undock his spacecraft from the Agena and damp out the rates and stabilize the spacecraft again. Gemini 9 saw Gene Cernan almost die in a spacewalk when he became overheated. His visor became fogged, and he encountered a sharp shard of metal at the aft end of the spacecraft that could have torn his suit open. Before the mission took off, Deke Slayton, who was the head of the astronaut office, instructed Tom Stafford, who was the commander of the mission, that if Cernan became marooned, Stafford was instructed not to stay in space and perish along with his co-pilot. He was instead to cut him loose, and something that almost happened.
I think conventional wisdom suggests that when Apollo 11 landed on the moon, that was when America won the space race with the Soviet Union. But you argue in the book, no, that's not the case, that the Gemini missions, that's when the space race was won. How come?
That's right. We became a much more adept spacefaring country than the Soviet Union was at the time. They beat us into space. They had the first satellite in orbit. They had the first man in orbit. They had the first 2-vehicle orbit. They had the first multi-person crew. But during the 20 months Gemini was flying, the Soviets launched nothing at all. They were working on building their Soyuz rocket and their later N-1 moon rocket, and neither one was terribly successful at that point. Meantime, the Gemini missions were popping off once every 10 weeks, accomplishing spacewalking, accomplishing rendezvous and docking, accomplishing long-duration missions, and that opened up a wide lead over the Soviets that Moscow was never able to make up again.
So what do you see ultimately as the legacy of the Gemini missions?
I think the Gemini missions will be seen as the program in which NASA and the country as a whole became spacefaring people. Until that point, the launches of the Mercury, the 6 Mercury astronauts who flew, they were dramatic, they were history-making, but in terms of technical achievement, there was a stunt-like quality to them. Not to diminish them, but there was more of just proving that we could get into space. I think the Gemini program will come to be seen as the program in which we became, as a nation, true space travelers.
Jeffrey Kluger is the author of the new book, Gemini, Stepping Stone to the Moon, The Untold Story. He spoke with Craig Cohen back in November. Still to come, what a 2-2 start to the season says about the Astros' chances this year. Stay with us as Houston Matters continues on News 88.7 and YouTube.
My name's Mike Quinn. I'm a professional artist, mainly working in ceramics and fiberglass and concrete. When I originally grew up, all my brothers were very talented. All the kids in our neighborhood were very talented. And 2 doors down from us, there was a ceramics factory that made custom tiles. They would give me a chunk of clay and I could go in there and make my little creatures. And so I was making things when I was 10, but I never put any value on it or thought that it would lead to anything until I was in college and failing out of vet school. And I realized that if I was going to compete, I had to do something I was good at. So I changed my major to art and primarily concentrated in ceramics. I was taking a ceramics class making a series of small fish, and I was able to go into Austin one day and we saw a sign in Chewy's restaurant looking for artists. It was actually an assignment from the teacher. She wanted a modular piece, several similar pieces, and I thought, well, a school of fish. So a friend of mine had some fish in a fish tank at his house that he'd caught out of the San Marcos River, some perch, and I bought a perch from him for $10. I molded that fish, and that fish became the original nexus to the whole creation of all the Fish with Attitude. Fish with Attitude was basically derived from my 6-week art show that turned into 18 years at Chewy's. And then, once I got the Chewy's gig, then it got exponential, and then I was in all the Chewy's, and then I got to deck the walls, and then it was Whole Foods, and did work for ZZ Top. Just took off. So my name is Mike Quinn. I'm an artist and an author, and you're listening to Houston Matters.
We know you value Houston Public Media. That's why you're watching right now. So take the next step and become a new member of the station you rely on. Every gift makes a difference. And what matters most right now is supporting the station that brings you the news and information you rely on. It only takes a minute to make a big difference. So join as a new member today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 800-364-8300.
Poet Marie Howe, winner of the Pulitzer Prize, reading from her collection New and Selected Poems, Monday, March 30th at Congregation Emmanuel. More at inprint.org.
Houston Public Media is licensed to the University of Houston System, governed by the UH Board of Regents. Information about open meetings, dates, times, and locations is online at uhsystem.edu.
Mid-80s for the high, sunshine, 70 right now at News 88.7.
The Houston Astros finally started scoring runs over the weekend and find themselves at 2-2 at the start of the season, splitting their opening series against the Los Angeles Angels. Yesterday's matchup saw the Stros and Angels tied at 6 in the 8th inning, but with doubles by both Isaac Paredes and Jose Altuve, they managed to come out on top in a 9-7 win. This would seem a significant improvement from their very first game, during which they scored no runs. So the offense is at least statistically on the rise. How about their pitching? Well, let's talk it over with Bleav and Astros podcast co-host Jeff Balke. Hi, Jeff.
Good morning.
Between their first 2 games, the Astros scored only 2 runs, and in their next 2, they totaled 20. Was either one of these a fluke?
Probably not. The funny thing about the Astros in the past few years is their pitching has really been good and their hitting's been really bad. If you look over the first couple of games, honestly, the pitching has been pretty bad. I think the starters have an ERA of something like 7.6 over the first 4 games. I mean, again, small sample size here, but when you look at it and you start thinking, okay, if the pitching's bad, the Astros aren't expected to be a great offensive team this year. That could spell some really ugly times ahead for the Astros. I don't expect it to remain that way. I think Hunter Brown, Mike Burrows, Tatsuya Imai are all going to be pretty good pitchers. I think their relief corps is going to be pretty good. The question is going to be, can they hit against other teams as well as they did against the Angels? And the Angels are probably going to be a pretty bad team this year. So I don't put too much into the first series of the year. The fact that they got the split, I think, is fine.
Yeah. So far in this very young season, who are some of the bright spots that are standing out that you think are going to maybe step up and be the next big players?
Well, I was impressed by Christian Walker. There was a stat that I think Chandler Rome put out saying that last year he was something like 9 for 102 against pitches that were 98 miles an hour or faster, and this year he's already 2 for 2. So he's kind of changed the way he bats, and I think that should help him in anything that he can do for the Astros would be good. Obviously, Joey Loperfido is hitting well, back now with the Astros. He's still not great against left-handed pitching, but that's a very small sample size. And then Yordan Alvarez being back is just a huge deal for the Astros. How the Astros offense goes is going to depend, I think, heavily upon how much Alvarez actually plays.
Yeah. You kind of said this earlier. There's, of course, plenty more baseball to come. Should we read very much into the results of this series just yet?
No, I don't think so, particularly on the pitching side. I think that the pitching is probably going to be fine, and I don't think the batting is going to be. I don't think the Astros are going to be scoring 20 runs, in over 2 games on a regular basis. But I'm not sure they're going to score 0 either. The key for the Astros, I think it was last year that when they scored 4 runs, they won 80% of the time or something like that. So the Astros, I think, can be a solid and competitive team, but they're going to have to score some runs and they're going to have to be good at pitching. And I know everybody out there is like, duh, that's how baseball actually works. But in the Astros case, you just don't know where they're going to be until we get, midway into the season probably.
Starting tonight, their next series is up against the Red Sox, a team with 1 fewer win, albeit with 1 fewer game as well. Mm-hmm. What can we expect from this matchup?
Well, the Red Sox are a team that's somewhat similar to the Astros. They're a team with high hopes, but I'm not sure that they're not projected to be one of the better teams in the American League. I think it should be an interesting matchup between the two. First things first for the Astros, that we get to see Lance McCullers back on the mound against the Red Sox. I think that's the first and most interesting sort of thing there, because I think what happens to McCullers through the first portion of the season is really going to determine what happens with Lance McCullers for the rest of the season. I mean, the Astros are probably going to have him on a relatively short leash this year, even though he's the number 5 starter. You've got guys like Spencer Aggetti and A.J. Bluebaugh and others who are available to pitch in that position, and if he is just not able to go, then I think they're going to make that switch fairly quickly.
In other Houston sports news, it has been officially announced that the WNBA is coming back to the city, with the Fertitta family set to purchase the Connecticut Sun, which will then likely become the Houston Comets in 2027. The Comets, of course, were a championship-winning franchise that ultimately disbanded in 2008. How big of a deal is this for the legacy of women's basketball in Houston?
It's a really fascinating thing because, the legacy of women's basketball in Houston actually goes back a long ways. There was a women's professional team in Houston back in I want to say the 70s or early 80s. And so, it was in the first 4 years, the Comets won the first 4 titles in WNBA history and had some incredible players, and Cheryl Swoops and Tina Thompson and, Cynthia Cooper. I think I think what's happening here, though, is the Rockets' timing is spectacular. They're coming back at a time when the collective bargaining agreement has been redone. There's the free agency is going to be crazy this year because so many players were ready to opt out knowing that they could make more money after the CBA was negotiated. There are 2 expansion franchises that are coming in Toronto and Portland at the same time. This is a very exciting time to own an NBA franchise and to be a WNBA fan, because it's just such a different world than it was back when the Comets were first around.
Yeah. Now, given the history of success under the Comets banner, should expectations for a brand new team be somewhat tempered, or do you think they'll start winning right out of the gate?
I don't know. It's a good question. I'm not that familiar with the Connecticut Sun. I do know they have a couple of draft picks. I think they picked 12th and 15th in the first round this year. I think so much is going to depend upon what happens with free agency, what happens with the draft. There's so many variables that can occur. But, teams in the NBA, WNBA can turn their fortunes around pretty quickly, and certainly they have a first-class organization in the Rockets with loads and loads of experience, both with women's basketball and not. So it certainly bodes well for their success, whether it's early on or over a period of time.
Jeff Balke is co-host of the Bleav in Astros podcast. Jeff, thanks for talking with us.
Thank you.
And that'll do it for today's show. The Houston Matters team includes Craig Cohen, Michael Haggerty, Brenda Valdivia, Mincho Jacob, and Laura Walker. Jared Carroll is our technical director. Reminder, you can check out Houston Matters anytime, subscribe to our podcast for the audio, or visit Houston Public Media's YouTube channel for the video. On tomorrow's show, we explore the world of science fairs and how they influence the future of their student participants. Plus, as we make our way towards Houston's infamous summer heat, we discuss how to ensure that your AC is prepared to keep you cool through those long months. And we learn about a local park recently renamed in the honor of a legacy of a beloved coach. I'm Joshua Zinn. Join us tomorrow for those and other Houston Matters.
We know you value Houston Public Media. That's why you're listening right now. Take the next steps and become a new